Hey there. Welcome to the Wordsmith's Forge with Matthew J. Coran. Today, I wanted to start, or rather continue, the Bretsinger Saga study. And we are on part 3, which I've titled The Weight of Leadership. And so, I'm going to talk today. First, I'll actually mention the part of the book that this is referencing. For those of you who haven't read it, this part pertains to King Colin, one of the main characters, who is having an audience with a couple of wealthy merchants from the province known as Crom. And now, Crom is very heavy in manufacturing. They're a very wealthy, very up and coming province. There's 7 provinces of Zephyr. King Colin rules over all of them, but it's kind of like the United States where each province has its own governorship, more or less. They have their own government, but then they all answer to the king. And so King Colin is talking with one of the stewards of Crom, which is their highest form of government. It's an oligarchy, right? Which meaning that it's basically a board of directors ruling over a province. And so, all the political jargon aside, these wealthy merchants come and petition the king to grant them more access to another province's resources, namely Tara, which is the capital province of Zephyr. And there's several reasons for this. The most prominent is that it is the most wealthy area of resources in the kingdom. It has a mineral known as dremite, and dremite is very useful in the chromium technology, the technological boom that they have, right? It's basically the lifeblood of all their manufacturing. It's an energy source, and they've been able to harness it to operate all kinds of crazy machinery, like vehicles, manufacturing, industrial type stuff. And they can't get enough of it. It's an extremely valuable resource, and they want to get as much of it get as much that their hands can get on, basically. And so they petition the king in order to gain greater mining rights within Tara. And they appeal to a contract basically made between Tara and Crom when there was a war going on to unify all of the provinces of Zephyr. They weren't always united under one kingdom. Crom partnered with Tara, they allied with Tara in order to bolster the war efforts. And part of the agreement was that Tara grants Crom as much mining rights as is needed to fuel the war efforts. And so that's how it begins, and it goes with a back and forth between the king and the stewards. The stewards assume that the king is very unlearned in this history because Colin wasn't king back then, someone else was. This is 18 years later. And so Colin surprises them with his knowledge of the subject. With every argument they put towards him, he immediately shoots it down by citing what the agreement actually states and points out when they're manipulating the wording or being very liberal with a certain interpretation. And so eventually he dismisses them. And there's a lot that goes on in this chapter political wise. I'll spare you most of it. You can read the book, and you can see all the minor little winks and nods that I put in there, alluding to larger goings on in the Zephyr Kingdom. But I want to talk about, what inspired this chapter and the nature of leadership and why Colin embodies a good leader. And there's a lot of different facets in it. So let's get into it. So I guess first, what kind of inspired this conversation is mostly my own personal experience. I work as a project manager in the engineering world and construction. And one thing that you grow very accustomed to when you work in construction, you find that construction is it's very similar to politics. I mean, everything at the corporate level gets political, right? And, construction's no different because it's all based on relationships, who you know. When certain problems come up, it becomes a game of finger pointing. Who's at fault? What caused it? Who can we throw under the bus? There's all kinds of this stuff going on all the time. And one thing you learn how to do, conduct yourself with honor. The key is not to engage in that at that level, which Colin does a really good job of not engaging in the game. He just points the game out, right? You'll see in like his language in the book, he'll literally say, let me find a good excerpt. Actually, I have it open right here. The stewards petitioned that their legal boundaries should include certain mines in Tara that have been pushed back on. And they get really technical and they split a lot of hairs to try and prove that they have this the mining rights. And Colin gets right to the point and says, dance around the issue all you like, the fact remains the same. Crom has been desperate for Dremite ever since the industrial boom 3 decades ago, and they are willing to push all legal boundaries to get their hands on it. And this is actually in response to their conflict with another province, Anwar. They would push the boundaries there, set up mines, claim that they own the land, and it would cause all kinds of border disputes. And so Colin gets right to the point. You're just desperate for more resources, and you're willing to push the boundary as far as you're able to. You will push the boundary as far as we're willing to let you push it. And this is me telling you, you're not going to push it any further. I'm enforcing a boundary. And that's a very important thing for a leader to be able to do, is enforce boundaries, right? Whether it's in your professional life, if you work in any kind of industry where it gets very political, it could even be at home. It could be with your relationships. It could be with people in your community. At some point, you got to learn to enforce boundaries. And there are, unfortunately, you would think that, you're someone who wouldn't take advantage of people, and you assume other people are the same way, where they're not trying to take advantage of you. There must be some kind of misunderstanding or something. No, sometimes people literally just like to push the boundary as far as they're able to. They're not always consciously aware of that. Sometimes it's just in people's nature. They want to, it's just in them to test other people. It's in them to test your boundary. And if you're weak, they're going to take more from you. And so one thing that our culture really has destroyed in us is in convincing us that it's toxic to enforce boundaries, that it's mean, that it's a misogynistic even, especially for men. Men are the ones who really enforce boundaries on like a societal level. And we've done a horrible job of that in recent generations, right? Think about Adam and Eve, the very first example of a weak boundary. Adam knew God's commandment, do not eat of the fruit. All right? There was no question about it. It wasn't that Adam didn't know. It wasn't that, you've convinced him that, oh, maybe it's not actually that bad, whatever. He knew what he was doing. And so he had a weak boundary. Eve offered him the apple. That a lot of church fathers have different ideas of the motives behind it. One of them agreed upon is that Adam feared being separated from Eve. Since Eve partook of the fruit, he didn't want her to be alone. He didn't want her to be cast out and him alone again. And so he also partook. And that's the thing. When you have weakness because of your attachments, it's how people get in. And so that's the whole thing of a leader. Crumb has things that Tara wants and arguably needs. They have all this industry, and they make this argument in the chapter. They argue that we have all the manufacturing, we have all of the industry that can make your lives so much easier, that will, your province is rich in all these resources, and with our manufacturing, we can make the best use of them. Right? And so they have things that the king would want. But the thing about boundaries is they need to be absolute, right? They need to be black and white. You can't have a gray area where, oh, sometimes it's okay and sometimes it's not, because then it just becomes arbitrary, right? And you'll notice when you do this, people might react very badly to it, right? At the end of this chapter, you have one of the stewards cursing King Colin to his face, right? He loses his mind. He's cursing the king in the middle of royal court. Colin obviously kicks them out after that. Again, enforcing a boundary. You don't talk to me that way in front of my royal court, right? But it just goes to show people aren't always going to respect your boundaries. That's okay. You need to enforce them nonetheless. That's what makes a solid leader, right? You do it because it's right, not because people are going to like you for it or because you'll get something out of it. In this case, Colin enforced that boundary of not allowing the mines, not just because they're playing a game, but it's because those resources, that Dremite is the lifeblood not only of industry, but of Tara and agriculture. Tara, as a province, is best known for its agriculture. They have the greatest farming output you can imagine every single year. And Colin even tossed out some statistics to them saying, we dropped by 33% last year, and the only difference was in how much Dremite you took. You took more. And so our production went down, right? Because Dremite has a very special property. It's basically a stone that mimics the power of a harmonic, which is a breath singer with the ability to speed up the processes of nature. Basically, it's like giving all of the plants a snort of crack, and they're just growing at an incredibly fast rate. So they're just shooting up and up while this Dremite's just filling them with power. Take that Dremite away, and all of a sudden the crops slow down. Production slows down, food supply goes down, everyone suffers. Colin sees that. And so he doesn't fall for all these siren songs of technological advancements, distribution of efficient distribution of resources, philanthropy, contracts, all this stuff. He just cuts right to the heart of it and says, this is what you're doing. This is how it's affecting my people. It needs to stop. Period. Right? And that's what a leader needs to do. A leader needs to be able to put his foot down and say, enough is enough. Right? And you don't always have to do it in a super aggressive manner like he does, right? He's the king. He can afford to be pretty aggressive. You know, he doesn't have to answer to a whole lot of people in that regard. He doesn't worry about making his superiors mad. He doesn't have any. He's the king, right? God's his superior. But, you know, in your own life, it doesn't always have to be super aggressive and dramatic like it is in this book. It's like that to really emphasize these behaviors. But in your own life, it might be a lot more mild. It can literally just be an offer even. People offering to do things for you that you don't want, or asking for things that you know you shouldn't give. And all you have to do is just say, no, thank you. No, thank you. Or I'm good. Sometimes that's all you need to do. And you can just do it very calmly. And a lot of times it's actually very disarming, right? You don't have to be super aggressive all the time, because sometimes it's actually worse to be aggressive, because you raise the temperature in the discussion and it becomes an argument. Like, people start pushing a boundary, you start getting more aggressive. And so that puts the next person, the person you're talking to, in a fight or flight response, right? And if they're aggressive, they're trying to aggressively push boundaries, they'll escalate, you know, and then it just keeps going back and forth, and it just gets chaos. It turns into chaos, right? So sometimes it's better to just be calm, to just not have emotion, to just calmly say, this is the boundary, this is the line, and I'm not going to let that be crossed, no matter the circumstances, right? The way I'm talking right now, I'm not triggering any emotion. I'm not emotional. I'm not mad. I'm not upset in any way. I'm just conveying information, right? And so that can be really effective at times. And it's important when you do this that you understand why you're doing it. You know, if you just draw boundaries for the sake of drawing them, you know, so you look like you're strong or you look like you're a leader, that doesn't work, because people can also detect fakeness, you know. You need to understand the why, and you need to be able to explain the why too. It's not always just about saying no, but giving your rationale. Let me show you how Colin does it in this chapter. I'll flip to it. Give me a second here. Bear with me. I'm kind of just flowing. Right. Okay, here it is. So this is in response to the merchants saying that our technological advancements are what's driving Zephyr's economy, and it's what's driving all this innovation that's elevating us as a civilization. So to cut off the supply now, to kill this momentum, is going to make us take a step back, right? So this is Colin's response. Your innovations, while impressive, also come at a cost. Have you done much research into Taran agriculture, steward? In the regions where Dremite mines were built, the harvest decreased by 66%. I got my percentage wrong on my own book. Compared to previous years. A year after that, the harvest declined another 50%. Where those mines were active, Tauran agriculture began to fall apart. The reason is simple. Dremite is the lifeblood of the land, and that's something Taurans have known for generations. You take that from the land for your own innovations, you ironically make life more difficult, Colin said. There you go. So he explains it in a way where he's not just saying no, he's telling you why, and he's not making it about himself. This is about the people, because that's the ultimate goal of a leader. You're a servant of the people. You're a servant of those under you. It's not about you. And you are a representative of the people. And so when Colin speaks, he's speaking on behalf of the Tauran people, whom he acknowledged, like, internally during this chapter. They have been taken advantage of by Crom because the last king gave Crom whatever they wanted, right? In exchange for military power and innovation. He gave Crom whatever they wanted and basically sold out the Tauran people. Colin wasn't interested in that. He wanted to empower the Tauran people. He wanted to give them back what they needed to thrive. And so he enforced that boundary. And so it's a good opportunity to reflect in your own life, because we all are leaders in some way, even if it's just for yourself, right? Like whether you're representing your coworkers, whether you're representing your community, your family, or just yourself, you have someone's interest to look out for. Now, even when I say that, it doesn't mean being selfish, but treat yourself with respect. You know, speak on your own behalf and don't be afraid to enforce boundaries for your own sake, right? But it's not because of your ego. It's because of what's healthy, what's good, and what's right. And do it unapologetically. Don't be afraid to speak up, even regardless of how people take it, because you have a right to set boundaries. You have a right to enforce them, and people will do everything they can. The devil will do everything he can to convince you to let him in, whether it's spiritually or through other people. But when you identify bad behavior, you identify that you're being taken advantage of or someone under you is being taken advantage of, have courage, have faith, confidence. Confidence, confide, means with faith. Have the faith to set that boundary knowing you're doing the right thing. And that, my friends, is the key to leadership. And that is what shapes this chapter and, in general, the character of King Colin going forward. And I encourage you guys to read this for yourselves and to meditate on what kind of leader Colin is, the attributes that make him a good leader, and how you can apply those to your own life, because we all certainly can in some way. So yeah, I'll leave you with that. If anything like this jumped out at you as I was going through it, let me know in the comments. Feel free to engage. I'd love to discuss this more with you guys. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share this with anyone you think could hear this message. And until the next time, take care. God bless.